All right. Good evening again, and welcome to tonight's CEO Community Conversation. We want to thank parents, students, and community members and partners for coming out to engage with us tonight for this very important topic. Before we get started, I'll introduce myself, I'll share tonight's agenda, and then we'll go over some logistics. My name is Shantae Guy. I'm going to be your moderator this evening. The agenda for tonight is going to be that we start with our youth voice. It's very important, I'm sure you all agree, for us to hear from our youth and their perspective. And so one of the members of the Black Lives Matter Coalition in Schools, John Gray, will be joining us in a couple of minutes. After John's remarks, we'll hear some opening remarks from Dr. Santelises. And then it'll come back to me. We'll start with a panel and we'll field questions around any topics that you'd like to discuss tonight. But this focus tonight is specifically on public safety and safety in our schools. We'd like to thank you all who have attended in person. We thank you all who have joined us on Facebook Live, and for those of you that are watching us on Channel 77. If the room gets too crowded, we do have an overflow room. That overflow room is room number 120. To get to that room, you're going to go out of these doors and make a left down the hallway, past the elevator banks, and make a right. There will be a staff member there directing folks to that room. For any parent that needs daycare services, they are available in the Family Engagement Center, which is room number 4, which is out of this door. Make a right, and it's on your left. Restrooms, very important things, are also out of this door. You're going to make a left, and they're down the hallway on your right. Just want to make sure I didn't forget any of the important stuff here. We do know that it's about dinner time, and while we aren't able to feed you dinner, there are light refreshments around the corner if it gets warm and you're looking for water or some level of sugar. There are light refreshments in the lobby behind this wall here. With all of the logistics out of the way, I am going to ask you to join me in welcoming John Gray, again from the Black Lives Matter Coalition in Schools, for his comments. John?
How everybody doing tonight? Good night. Like she said, my name is John Gray. I'm actually a youth organizer with the Baltimore Elder Project, and we're partaking in Black Lives Matter Coalition. So tonight, like she said, I'll be sharing our current solutions for the current increase of in-school violence and the Black Lives Matter Coalition take on how we can solve these issues. Okay. Like she said, my name is John Gray. I'm representing the Baltimore Elder Project. Tonight I'll be speaking for the Black Lives Matter at Schools Coalition. Youth from the Baltimore Elder Project, the intersection and education for the Baltimore movement of rank and file educators, came together to propose a set of solutions for underlying issues that caused recent set of assaults on staff members. Our time is limited, so let's get into it. We think that the first 3 weeks should be solely dedicated to peer-to-peer and peer-to-staff building and training and bettering that relationship, right? We believe that if the relationships between our students and our staff members are a lot easier, these altercations like this are less likely to happen. We believe that we need more art classes in schools, more ways of liberal arts for students, more ways for students to express themselves. If students feel like they have an outlet in their school, they feel like they have a voice, this tension, this built tension that we have in our school systems will kind of decrease. We think that students need mental health checks given by professionals at least once a year. When social workers and school counselors go to a school crisis management, it's too late, right? So to have school counselors and have crisis management in the school after an event is too late because the event has already happened. The students already dealing with the consequences. If we have these things built into our school systems, it lowers the chances of these things happening. We need trainings of de-escalation, right? Ways for our teachers to be able to prevent these actions before they're happening, right? So trying to calm down a student who's already riled up, trying to fight or already engaged in a fight doesn't really help them as much as if you are trained within your job requirement to de-escalate situations, whether it's pulling the student aside, changing the way you talk to them, different ways like that. Each schools must fund restorative practices with fidelity and integrity. This means that there should be a team of staff at each school whose sole job is restorative practices, right? So restorative practices currently exist in some of our schools, but they're not executed properly, right? They're usually executed after events. We do a lot of aftermath, right? We need to be more proactive with our students so that way these events can be avoided, right? It doesn't matter if we're doing all the things in the world to help students after they've taken, the turn. We need to make sure that we can stop them from those things happening. We need this sounds kind of off, but we need we believe we need 2 staff members per class, right? We have teachers trying to teach 35 students in already packed classrooms where we don't have enough teachers. So if we can have one student kind of take the child out of class, de-escalate them, while the rest kind of facilitates the rest of the class, that kind of eases the way. And when it comes to funding, we can have retired teachers, we can have community members. To kind of quicken up, we believe that we need outside community members inside the schools. If school doesn't feel like a 9 to 5, we feel like it's kind of intertwined with your life, you kind of respond differently. Each student should have time in the day for community development or personal development, like an advisory period, and ways that they can handle life issues in school. School shouldn't just be grades. Their students with behavior issues in small groups, right? So like 4 to 5 class. So we need to have councils for our students in class, right? Finally, we need to keep youth in the active part of the conversation. Currently, the panel only has 1 youth on it, right? We're here to talk about how we can stop problems between youth and staffs, and there's only 1 student on the panel that goes to a school, right? That's not okay. We need to bring youth into the conversation. We believe that we need to restructure the code of conduct and have students present at those conversations, right? It doesn't matter that we have meetings after the fact that are open to the public. We need to have meetings that are intertwined with our school life. If students' voice are intertwined with our everyday school life, these situations, this head-to-head doesn't happen. I think, and to top it off, we just believe that we need to find ways to better, like I said, better intertwine our students, better keep them in the conversation. The people in the room we are the solution to these problems, right? So if we pick and choose when we want to partake in problems, then it doesn't solve anything, right? We need to be in the conversation 24/7. We need to have these ideals intertwined to our everyday school life. If you want to reach the Baltimore Algebra Project, you can find us at Instagram at the Baltimore Algebra Project. We've got social media you can follow. You can look for the Baltimore BLM at school. Thank you again for the forum. If there's anything you take away from what we said, is that we need to keep youth in the conversation, and we need to structuralize the way we handle problems differently. It's a whole lot of after fact, and there's not a lot of hands-on before the problem. We need to realize that students are people too, and they co-op. We need to change the way they co-op with teachers, and we need to have all this stuff kind of intertwined in our everyday school life. Thank you. Like I said, I'm a representative. I'm a youth organizer at the Baltimore Algebra Project. I'm a representative of the Black Lives Matter Week of Action, and Intersection, and the and Baltimore teachers.
Thank you so much, John. So what I think I heard John say is that a proactive engagement with our youth is something that's going to be really important in order for us to navigate successfully, that we need to understand the interconnectivity and the intersectionality of all of these pieces. And specific ideas that he had, if I want to enumerate those for folks that are taking notes: peer-to-peer and or peer-to-staff training, mental health checks proactively, de-escalation training for teachers. Each school funds restorative practices, 2 staff members per class, community development or an advisory period for students so that school isn't just about academics, keeping youth an active part of the conversation, and restructuring the code of conduct. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Santelises, and then she'll punt back to me.
Thank you, Shantae, for facilitating. Can everybody hear me okay? Okay, let's see. Oh, see, and you would think I would know using these every week, but I forgot. Is this better, everybody? All right, so maybe what I'll do, I'm sorry, what am I doing? Somebody's trying to click me. It's fine. Is this better? Okay, so I'll just project until we get going. So first, I want to thank everybody for coming this evening. We made the adjustment that I think was an appropriate adjustment, with regards to what was previously scheduled Facebook Live kind of CEO event, and I think it was the appropriate time, given a lot of the compounding of challenges that really came to head over the last week, to be joined by members of our community. You have heard and see that we have a variety of folks here. But I think to harken back to something that John just said, the need to be proactive and to really rethink what the supports are to proactively address some of the challenges that, frankly, we're facing as a community, but that are spilling over into schools, is going to require youth voice, but it's also going to require youth voice as a key component to all of us coming together to work together to make sure that our schools are places where, one, staff and students feel safe, and as John rightly said, we are proactive rather than only reactive. And so one of the things that I just want to emphasize, because Shantae is going to keep me to 2 minutes, and for those of you who know me, you know that is an incredibly difficult task, that this whole frame that we have really fits with the district focus that we have really articulated. It's actually back on now. Can you all hear now? Yeah, it's better now. Thank you, though. Around wholeness. And one of the things that I appreciated about the real tangible suggestions that John made is that, one, there's really very little here to disagree with. I think the question is about implementation. And the question is about how do we maximize the resources that go just beyond a teacher in a class or a principal in a school and really mobilize around that. And our challenge is often, right, the implementation of something that requires us to connect with the world outside of school, not just school. And one of the things that I have said over the past few days is that absolutely there are things that we can do, but that this has got to be an extended community effort. So I just want to say a big thank you to everybody on the panel who agreed last minute, really, with the change to come out tonight. Looking forward to hearing you all, your questions, and together responding and really trying to think through together what tangible next steps need to be. Did I keep within 2 minutes, Shantae?
Of course not, but that's okay.
I tried.
You had a lot of important things to say. So before we get started, I do want to take the opportunity to thank a few youth groups that are in the room, because again, it's important that they want to be a part of these conversations. And so in addition to the Black Lives Matter Coalition in Schools, I'd like to thank the Baltimore Algebra Project for its representation today. I'd also like to thank the Ceasefire Youth Ambassador Corps for its representation today. I believe we have Olivia Coolish here with us. Are there any other youth groups that are represented today? Great. So, I'm sorry? Is it here?
Program director is here, youths are not here. So I'm not nearly as important, but go get the message.
But thank you so much for representing them tonight. So before we start tonight's panel, I'm going to give the panelists a couple of minutes to introduce themselves, for those of you that don't know everyone that's sitting on the panel, and to talk briefly about why they're here tonight, why this is important to them. And we'll start to my left with Councilman Brandon Scott.
Thank you, ma'am, and good evening, everybody. It says I have 3 minutes. I'm going to do it real quickly. I'm Councilman Brandon Scott, City Councilman for the 2nd District of Baltimore City, the Chair of the Public Safety Committee, and most importantly, in the House of City Schools, a Mervo grad.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Ebony McKeever. I am currently a social studies teacher at Mervo. Not only that, I am a member of PCAB, the Parent and Community Advisory Board. I am a proud mother of 7 children who currently attend Baltimore City schools, and there are a host of other organizations that I belong to as well. But tonight is important for me because I am an advocate for the students, for the children of Baltimore City, and I am also a big advocate for Baltimore City schools in general, and I want to make sure that we are heading in the right direction and that Baltimore City Schools District is going to be the best school district in the country. So, here to make that happen.
That's kind of hard to follow. Good evening. My name is Akil Ham. I'm the Chief of School Police. I'm a native of West Baltimore. My son is a graduate of City College. He's at Lafayette this year. I'm just here to make sure that both students and staff all feel safe each and every day in our schools.
Hello, my name is Derek Massey. I'm a student athlete at Paul Lawrence Dunbar High School, and I'm just here to answer y'all questions about the things that have been going on recently and about the changes in the school system that I hope are coming.
Hello, my name is Lee Treescant. I am one of the co-organizers. Hey, Anthony. Co-organizers for Baltimore Ceasefire, the Baltimore Ceasefire movement, to be clear, because people sometimes get that confused with a city ceasefire program. I've graduated 2 children from Baltimore City Public Schools, actually both of them from Carver. My daughter is a student at Mervo, and she is almost on her way out. Even though my daughter is in her last 2 years of high school, it's very important to me for the culture of Baltimore City to be way more peaceful than it is right now, and for us to think about the ways that we interact with one another and manage conflict. Conflict is inevitable. Violence does not have to be, and so that's the reason that I'm here today.
Thank you all. So before we get started, I'd like to offer apologies from Erica Bridgeford, who is also a co-founder of the Baltimore Ceasefire Movement, who was scheduled to be here tonight. Erica asked me to extend her apologies to you all. She recently suffered a death in her family, which is preventing her from being here tonight. And she obviously has the utmost confidence in Latrice as a co-founder of the Baltimore Ceasefire to provide the organization's perspective in addition to her own personal perspective. So let's talk about how the panel is going to go tonight. Because this meeting was originally scheduled to be a Facebook Live session, not only will we be taking questions from folks in the room and in the overflow room, if there are folks in that room, but also folks from Facebook Live. And so you'll see me walk around with the mic and give the mic to someone to ask a question, and then you'll see me step away as I entertain questions from Facebook Live, so that we're making sure that everyone has the opportunity to engage in the way that is most accessible to them. Is that fair? Okay, awesome. Expectations around engagement. Questions or comments, we're going to hold to 60 seconds, right, so that we can get as many of them as possible. This topic is one that all of us have an opinion on and that all of us have a vested interest in, and we want to make sure that you guys are getting your questions to the panelists and they have the time to answer as many questions as possible. I may ask follow-up questions if I feel like your question was asked and not answered. That's my job as the moderator, right, just to make sure that we get clarity around those topics. Any questions that are not answered, either because they are posted via Facebook Live or you were unable to get your question asked because we run out of time, we'll have index cards at the table when you leave so that you can write your questions down, and we will be answering all questions within 48 hours after tonight's meeting on the Facebook Live thread. Okay? So with that said, let's get started. Is there a question in the room? And if you don't mind, just introducing yourself. First name is okay if you're comfortable sharing it.
Good evening. My name is Angela Campbell. I'm a proud teacher in Baltimore City. This is my 13th year. I appreciate the CEO's efforts to addressing the whole child, but my concern has been, why aren't city schools identified as trauma-sensitive schools? We all know how trauma changes the child's developing brain, and we know our children are experiencing traumas from the past. They're having ongoing traumas now. So why don't we have trauma-sensitive schools?
Thank you, Angela. We'll ask the CEO to address that question.
So I think part of it is really, where do we start and where do we need to expand, right? And so I think the place that we started was at the place of how do we develop and support schools to become more healthy environments and have healthy ways of interaction. So John mentioned earlier restorative practices. He also referenced, which is true, and you know to be true because you're a teacher, that it doesn't always, we haven't perfectly implemented, right? We haven't gotten to the point where everybody feels like they have the knowledge and the tools to really be able to do that. And we started with small cohorts of schools. We have places where teachers and principals tell me they're beginning to feel the difference, but there's still a long runway. And if you think about the fact that this was the first time that the district has said, right, it's restorative practices. It's not necessarily just, pick one, pick another thing, but we're all going to go in the same direction, and we have a ways to go with that. The other piece that we've done and that we were hoping to do, and again, we're getting started on some of this, is through our work with CASEL around social emotional learning. Part of why we decided to partner with CASEL was, one, because we wanted a consistent framework around the district, but the other was for schools to be able to select where they wanted to start. And in places where schools are saying the place we want to start on social emotional learning is around dealing with issues of trauma, right? The CASEL framework allows them to do that so that it's not so structured that you say you must do this, this, and this in this order. It's really about a school identifying where they're going to begin in that. That being said, over and over again, and I just had a meeting with principals before this one, and of course safety came up as part of that conversation, and they were saying the same thing. And so I think it is more about kind of the trajectory, right, that we're on, and that it's not just, and I've been pretty focused on the fact that we do need to be trauma responsive schools, but I also don't want the trauma to define the person, right? And that young people, if we are getting the tools we need as adults, which is what I'm hearing in your question, right? Like we've got to have centers, we have to have that knowledge at schools to be able to do that. But I also think that part of the wholeness is allowing young people to not be defined by their trauma either. And so that's where the art, that's where the advisory, all those suggestions that John brought up make a lot of sense. I think where we need the feedback, and frankly, dipping in with teachers as well, is what does that look like on the trajectory of everything that needs to happen, knowing that in some schools I'm hearing immediately, look, we need to begin with the trauma piece. And in other schools, they're saying we actually want to we want to start with building a healthy overall culture because we're not even sure how to do that. So I think where we need your feedback, other teachers' feedback, clearly students' feedback, is for each school, what makes sense as the starting place while we still hold the expectation across the district. Because to your point, and I will say this, it shouldn't be optional, that schools understand better how to deal with the trauma young people are coming in. So it's not like, hey, choose whether you want to deal with trauma or not, but the starting place will be different for each school because each school is coming in. And we have schools already that have done deep work in trauma-informed practices and trauma-informed care. They're ready to be anchors, right, for other schools doing it. I would say a lot of it is the implementation and just getting things up and going. But I don't disagree. And, if you've got suggestions on ways we can accelerate that, that'd be great to hear. Yep.
Do any of the panelists have follow-up comments? Great. We'll take our first question from Facebook then, and we'll come back to the room. So this question is from Lorna Hanley. Thank you so much for your question. It looks like 9 other community members are interested in your question as well. There's a thought that we've missed an opportunity here to include a principal or a school leader, given how involved they have to be in these processes. Can we talk about the missed opportunity, just to
Sure.
put it really plainly, and then what thoughts folks have about what the involvement of the principals should be from other panel members as well, as it relates to alleged assaults or incidents of violence in school.
So I will just say quickly to let the other panelists kind of get into what the supports are. With regard to tonight, it was literally a matter of turnaround and number of people on the panel. That's all it was. We actually had toyed around with having, not toyed around, but we had considered having a principal, and it was really about space for voice, space for just such a quickly put together. But we did have principal representation on the list. And then the final thing I will say is just reference back again that I met with 15 principals literally 40 minutes ago. And this topic also came up, and I came away with kind of 2 pages of this is what we need now around this issue. So it was literally just the constraints of this evening, and not because we think we can breeze over the role of the principal.
Another panelist around their thoughts about principals' involvement?
So I think that when you're talking about anything involving schools, and especially when we're talking about dealing with young people as the whole child, principals have to be at the forefront of that, because they know their school, they know their school's culture, their school's climate, but most importantly, they know what each and every child is bringing into their doors every day. So we know that these things have to include the principals, they have to include the teachers, and most importantly, they have to include the students themselves, because they all know best what's going on with these young people and what's going on with these young people and their families. So when we're talking about moving to these things, because I think that one of the things that has bothered me about this conversation is that you have these people who are like yelling and screaming and calling my office to say things that we know won't work, but make them feel better in the immediate, right? Oh, we just need to suspend, arrest, and expel these children. That's not going to work, right? We did that literally the whole entire time I was a student in city schools, and we know that that's not going to work. And when you know better, as my grandma would say, you do better. And we have to get past that, and we have to get to the ground level, and the ground level definitely includes principals and teachers, but also we have to include the students, because they know what's going on with themselves and their peers more than anyone.
Thank you. We'll take a question from the audience.
Yes. Yes, good evening. My name is Zatura Sims-Eel. I'm a more than 40-year advocate and activist for our youth and our schools. I've been an education advocate for a really long time, and I have worked in Baltimore City, in just about every public school in the city, and I've worked in cities across the country. And the sister talked about trauma-centered schools. When we look at our community, we should have a trauma-centered concept as a district, because every single child comes from different parts of this city, and they all bring trauma when they walk into the doors. And we do everything for our veterans who have PTSD. We do everything for everyone else. And our children cannot live in the environment that they live in every day and not suffer from PTSD. And we cannot expect them to continue to come to school on time, with their work on time, and be attentive, because they're concerned about whether or not they'll be shot when they leave the building. So what we have to do, I believe, in my humble opinion, as my friend always says, in my humble opinion, I believe we have to begin to be honest with ourselves. And we have to stop putting on faces that look good but don't mean anything when our children are still killing themselves. So as adults, we have the responsibility to be just stewards, take care of our children, and recognize the needs that they have and stop talking about what we cannot afford and give them, like every other person on the planet, when it comes to their children, they find and make a way. So as a district, every single school should be trained in trauma-centered efforts. Every single school should have personnel trained to know how to de-escalate issues. Every single school, not just a few, but every school, because I've been in too many schools here recently where there's a fight every day. Every single day of the week. No one can be expected to learn or teach in that kind of environment. So I believe this conversation can go further by us saying we're going to be honest with ourselves, look at things the way they really are, look at where we want them to go, and let's work together and bring the city into the picture, because schools can't do it alone, teachers can't do it alone, and children are scared. And that's why they do many of the things they do, because they are suffering from trauma. So I say let's get some real counselors who know our children, who understand what to say and how to deal with our children, and stop taking folks who are afraid of the children.
Thank you, Mama Zatora. She and I go way back. Thanks, Mama Z. Thank you for your comments. I'd actually like to ask Derek to speak to some of the comments that we heard from Mama Zatora around what your experiences have been as a youth in Baltimore City in general, and in Baltimore City Public Schools as it relates to what may be PTSD for some students, what may be trauma. Like, what have your personal experiences looked like, and what are your thoughts about what Mama Zatora just said?
I feel that that's a great idea because it just matches with everything that's going on in the city right now. Like, you can take kids from all across the city, just put them in one school and expect them to get along. It's not going to work like that. And I feel like when they all coming from different pasts and they all got different futures, they're not going to all just connect and feel the same about some of the stuff. So I feel that you do need trained personnel that know how to, like, get to us and handle stuff with us, not just talk us through it. So that's how I feel about what she said, and I feel that's a great idea.
Thank you. All right, we're going to take our next question. It's on Facebook. Leatrice, I'm coming your way. How can community organizations that care get involved?
So the partnership and connection that's the easy answer. One of the things that was very important to Baltimore Ceasefire from the very beginning, and for people who know anything about our origins, know that we had been asking for youth from the very beginning. When we held our very first public meeting and subsequent meetings, initially, one of the things that we said was that we turned over a very violent culture to our children. And so it is our responsibility to remedy that, to fix it, and to listen to what it is that they have to say about the world that they inherited. I think some organizations suffer from a savior complex, where they want to be the ones, they want to identify as the ones who actually did it, instead of approaching the situation like it really is. Like, there's not going to be one organization in Baltimore that saves anything. The city schools is not going to be able to save Baltimore. The police are not going to be able to save Baltimore. Baltimore City is responsible for itself. And so when we talk about getting organizations involved, reducing ego and elevating community is one of the ways that we do that. When we talk about making connections, going into the places that you can get into, making connections. So if I know the CEO of Baltimore City Public Schools and I have an organization and I'm connected to other organizations, then I make sure that when I bring myself to that table, that I bring other organizations to the table with me as well. The idea that, and I'm going to repeat this because I think that it's very important, that one entity, one person, one organization is going to get us out of what it is that we're in right now. That's not reality. It's going to take for all of us. And I would like for us to stop using the language they. When are they going to do something? When are they going to show up? When are you going to, when the reality of it is, when are we?
Thank you. We'll take our next question from the room.
Hi, my name's Corey Gaber. I'm a sixth grade teacher in the city. And in any restorative conversation, part of that conversation has to do with ownership. All the parties involved have some role in creating the outcome that happened in the situation that needs to be resolved. So thinking on where we are here, teachers have a role to play in why things look the way they look. Students have a role to play and contribute in some way to why things look the way they look. Same thing with the surrounding community. I'd be curious to hear from the district's perspective, because everybody has opinions about what y'all should be doing. I want to hear, as the district looks back, before we even talk about the plans moving forward, what do you feel like you can take ownership for that has contributed to the current outcomes that we have that we don't want?
Yeah. So, and again, I've never, I hope nobody's ever heard me say that this is, that we are not, we don't have a role. I don't think I have ever said that. I will say, as I have looked with a team of people, not just myself, one of the things, and I don't want to go incident by incident, but I think one of the things we have to take responsibility for is how we have engineered over a period of years, and we still have practices that do this. We have engineered particular school environments to have more than their fair share of challenges. They have more than their fair share of young people with special needs, and it doesn't mean that because you have special needs, right, that you can't learn, that you can't be an incredibly contributing citizen. But when you have a school, by design of the system, has 40 to 50% of its young people who need a different level of support, we did that. The other piece that we've done is we have concentrated teachers with the least amount of experience and the least amount of evaluated and demonstrated proficiency, and y'all know what I'm saying when I say that, in particular classrooms and particular settings. So we have the least prepared people in schools with the highest concentration of need. So when I sat down with a cross-function of team here, and we peeled back the layers, and I'm not going to tell you which incident, right? We could trace back the decisions that were made that set up that to happen, right? We had a counselor, a related service provider. So, I'm just breaking it down because you asked, Corey, and I'll give it to you straight if you want to ask it straight, right? We put mental health professional in that particular situation who had questionable proficiency, working with young people from our community. So if you combine all of that, which were district actions, and I'm not putting that on anybody but us, which is why I convened my team to say, what did we do? We set up the tinderbox that then exploded. And what was interesting in talking to principals today, who were amazing in that they were very real, and this is the piece that we've got to get our handle on, and it's not that this happens every day. Let me be clear. I was in a school this morning with young people who were programming bots, who should be able and will have and do have, right, the learning capacity as the smartest kids on this planet. And they were demonstrating it. They taught me more about code in 10 minutes than some folks who are professionals every day. But I will say this, right? One of the things principals said to me in real time was that the actual fear that is happening around is seeping into, right, the schools. And so one of the things that they were asking me, because they gave me a list just like John gave me a list, and it's amazing to see the cross-section of what folks are saying, is they were asking us to rethink some of these pieces around who are our mental health professionals, how do we prioritize their placement in particular schools, and quite frankly, how do we redo our placement of young people so that we can have honest community-wide discussions of when I don't want those kids in my class, I don't want those kids in my children's school. We are allowing our practice and our lack, frankly, as a system of courage to have young people, right, from a variety of profiles and backgrounds come together, and instead we are warehousing, for lack of a better term, concentrated need without the corresponding supports that are needed. So you want to know, that's the stuff we've been talking about. How do we dismantle and how do we pull that apart in the same way that we were talking earlier about where is the implementation missing from what the intent of the blueprint is. So that's what I own.
So our next question is from Facebook. It's from Molly Connor. Chief Ham and Ebony will be coming to you for this question. We all know that there are many incidents of violence that staff, teachers, and students face daily that don't make their way to Facebook. Going back to the days of blanket suspension can't be the answer. Kids need to be in school, and there's no data to indicate that suspensions modify behavior. But what resources are available to schools to implement meaningful alternatives to suspensions and detentions? And so from your individual perspectives as a teacher and as the chief of Baltimore City Public School Police, how would you answer that question?
What I would say briefly is rules without relationships breed rebellion. And the focus that we have now is building positive relationships with kids. Yes, we do see a lot of the negative behavior in the media that we've been seeing recently, but believe it or not, we get in front of a whole lot more than what we see in the news before it even goes down. There's a lot of things that young people bring to us because we have those relationships with kids that could potentially go wrong if we didn't have those relationships and kids didn't feel comfortable telling us what was going on because the trust was there. We do have training that's available. We've been meeting but what I'd like to see, and I know the conversation is always kind of centered around teachers, but we do have other staff that get assaulted in the buildings, like hall monitors, cafeteria workers, other folks that are support staff in the buildings. And I think what we really need to look at is building quality connected relationships with kids, and also looking at trauma, looking at youth mental health first aid, looking at institutional racism, history of segregation in the city, implicit bias, all those things that every staff member should have to be able to understand what we're dealing with, because our young people are coming to us every day and they're struggling and they're dealing with issues and they're coming in the door, and we can't pick and choose what kids we're going to accept. They come as is. And so we have to figure out how we're going to deal with them and give them the support that they need. And so that's one of the things that we're talking about rolling out now, not just getting that training for certain staff, but for all staff to be able to deal with our young people.
So I will say this. I had a conversation with my students today, and I told them that I was going to be here. And I also said to them, what is it that you want the adults on the panel to understand as we sit and we decide how not only to keep schools safe, how to keep, the teachers safe, but how to keep you safe? And the reoccurring theme over and over again that I heard was that the same thing we're talking on. The lack of relationships between staff members and students. But I will also say this, as also sitting here as a teacher, as an educator, we kind of talked about principals earlier and the relationship to principals to the school building. But what I will say is that your teachers show up every day giving everything that they have for the students in the school building. And when we talk about who knows those students best, it is those teachers who know those students best. So when the students walk into the classroom and they're experiencing trauma and they're experiencing problems and there's a reaction, the first thing that a teacher may do is say, let's step outside and talk, or go take a walk and come back to me when you've calmed down. However, the fine line that we have to walk is that there are rules in the school building that have to be followed. So if we send a child to sit outside in the hallway so that they can cool off, then the child is being sent back into the classroom before they've had a chance to really, identify what's going on with themselves, or before they've had a moment to cool off and really figure out what's going on with them. And so I think it goes back to what's going on in the individual school buildings. I know the code of conduct is supposed to make there be a uniform policy that is followed from school to school so that we can say if child does A, then the reaction is C. But are we looking at what individual schools need? And maybe the code of conduct is not what each individual school needs in dealing with the what's going on with our children in the schools. Maybe it is that a student forgot their ID for whatever reason, and they're coming to school, but they're not being let into school. So how are we further helping or hurting the student when these are the issues that they're dealing with? So I think it's really understanding and not only letting the teachers be the master of the content, but also allowing us to be the masters of the student and really allowing us to work one-on-one, and really allowing us to, not only be the teacher to facilitate learning, but we also are able to facilitate relationships. We're also able to facilitate matching students with organizations who are able to help them. Like your teacher is so much more than just the person who provides knowledge to the students. And I think if we can figure out a way to maybe involve the teachers a little more and allow us a little more leeway in how we handle the behavior of the students, I think that goes a long way as well.
Thank you. Tanae, do you have someone that has a question?
Hi, Dr. Santelises, I appreciate you being straight up and direct with your
Ma'am, would you
comment.
mind holding the mic a little closer to your mouth? We're having a difficult time
Okay,
hearing.
let me know if you can hear me. I appreciate you being direct and straight up with your comment and taking ownership. And Ms. McIver, your comment about what students need and want from their teachers is right on. I have a certification dealing with at-risk youth, and that's exactly what they tell me. We are young, but people don't respect us and think that we don't matter and our voices don't mean anything. We have feelings, and all they do is tell us what to do and expect us to do it, and no one listens and no one follows up. My question is immediacy. I would like to know, as a stakeholder, that every last one of us are, when you go into these schools, each school has their own practice because it's decentralized from top to bottom. So every school is doing something different. So when I decide to pull my kid from one school and put my kid in another school to my kid to another school because of the fights and my kid is not learning and I know my kid can do better, and then they tell me send it to this school and that school has a problem, what am I supposed to do? When I go into a school, the postman and the delivery person, me as a parent, any one of you that are visiting, you coming in, every door is locked. You can't talk to a counselor, you can't talk to the principal, you can't talk to the police officer. They on lockdown, and you walk in the hall, there's something going on, but then what am I supposed to do? I want to be safe too. And where is my kid? I can't find out where my kid is, and my kid is afraid, but I expect my kid to learn, and I expect the school system to teach her. So I need to know, all this sounds good. I want to know immediacy. What am I supposed to do start tomorrow? What is the cafeteria worker supposed to do starting tomorrow? What are the nurses supposed to do starting tomorrow? What are the parents supposed to do starting tomorrow? What are the students are supposed to do starting tomorrow that come to school that want to learn? The parents who want their kids to learn. We all want our kids to be viable citizens in society. You know that. What is the police officer who assigned to schools can do, and their hands are tied? What the teachers that need support and they don't get it, what are they support? I need answers immediacy, because I need something done now. These conversations and talks, they sound good, but what are we going to do now? People are hurting. There's a cry for help. There's a crisis going on now. This is what I'm directing to the panel.
Thank you for your question, ma'am. And so it sounds like looking for a sense of urgency around responsiveness and interested in what everyone involved in the education of our youth can do immediately, quite honestly, around starting to shift the paradigm of what we're seeing happen in schools. So I'm going to ask Dr. Santelises to address that question, and then if any other panel members would like to jump in.
So first, one of the things that, that we did this past week, and I sent out communication to all the schools, is we are reprioritizing some of, again, and kudos to John and the young people who helped him put it together, a lot of training that we knew needed to happen, but was further along. So, for example, de-escalation, right? And that piece, I've heard from principals, from teachers, John referenced it earlier, just the tools, the number of folks I have talked to who are saying when a young person, right, when there is a conflict, right, a restorative circle is not going to help you in the middle of trying to prevent a situation from blowing up. There are specific, and frankly, school police has spent a lot of time in de-escalation training for school police, and so we've prioritized doing that immediately. We're also taking a look with Chief around how we are deploying and setting up our systems within school police. Is there a different way we have to be able to do that? And I want to say something else, that what I have also heard from school leaders and some teachers I've talked to is, while what has been publicized recently have been student-teacher conflicts and student-to-student conflicts, there are also parent-to-parent conflicts, right? So you have educators in schools who don't know what to do if community members coming in, right, who are stressed. Right? I mean, I get it. You're already wound tight. Somebody doesn't talk to you the right way and it sets off, right? So we are prioritizing that immediately. And I will tell you, one of the best parts about last week was the number of calls I got from community members, everybody, council people, like Councilman Scott and others, who immediately were saying what they would do, right? So, for example, the Dunbar Alumni Association has committed, when I talked to Bishop Miles, right, he called me, I didn't call him, and he said, we realize we have to do more. And we are committing to providing mentors for every student. They're not going to be able to do it overnight, but they are committing to providing mentors for every single young person at Dunbar. And he said, I'm not expecting you to do that, because you all have to teach. We should be doing that. And so I will just give that as an example, like immediately, they're working on that now. And again, we put out to staff, because staff around the safety piece, is a concern. Those are things that we're saying we're ramping up now, because we need to have people know, to your point, that we're not just waiting for the long arc of something to change. We're combining with what needs to happen now and how we set ourselves up in the future for that. So that's just immediately for the school system, but other folks should chime in.
So, I was going to say engagement.
Yep.
One of the things that I've noticed recently is that we're engaged when the district doesn't call a snow day. We are engaged when there is a video of a teacher being assaulted. But being in a school building every day, I'm lacking the engagement. And when I'm talking about engagement, I mean engagement at every level. Ms. Carruthers, I know her well because she was engaged in the school building that I was at. And every day she was holding everybody's feet to the fire and making sure that we were accountable not only to her child, but accountable to everyone else's child in the building. Engagement from the teachers. If you don't know a child because you haven't taught them, doesn't mean you can't speak. It doesn't mean you can't get to know that student's name. It doesn't mean that you can't speak and say hello. Engagement from community members. We have so many community organizations, but yet we don't have enough community organizations willing to step into the school building and volunteer their time and say, what is it that I can do for you? How can I be of service? How can I help the school be better? So I'm just asking for everyone, and even if you don't have a child right now that attends Baltimore City Schools, that doesn't mean that you're disconnected from the school, and it doesn't mean that you're disconnected from the school district. You still have a responsibility to be engaged in what's happening with the schools. So show up to meetings. There was a priority meeting at Mergenthaler, and I think there were maybe 6 community members, parents that showed up. So, and I'm looking at this room full of people now, and I'm saying, where was the support when the district is talking about how are we prioritizing what it is that we want to do for your children, what it is that we want to do for the students. So engage. Engagement doesn't mean you have to show up physically. Engagement means you can volunteer, not volunteer, but you can send a question to Facebook. You can retweet something. You can, shake a hand of a student. There are many ways to engage, and I'm just asking everyone to commit to engaging in a child's life, in a school's life, just to do something there.
In the immediate, I'm sorry, Councilman. In the immediate, some of the things that we've done is formalize relationships with the Baltimore Police Department, the Sheriff's Department, MTA Police, because we realize we can't do this on our own. So we've also reached out to some community-based organizations such as Safe Streets and other organizations to be able to help us, because we realize everybody doesn't trust the police. So sometimes we have to reach out to those organizations that have those relationships and ties to the young people that they trust. And so we've put that word out. We had an issue today where we put the word out. We knew something was going to go down, and we were able to get in front of it, and we didn't have an issue, but we got that intelligence, and we knew where to funnel that information to in order to eliminate that problem. Sorry, Council.
It's quite all right, Chief. I was just going to say, just to echo the sentiments, I think the most important thing people can do is be present and talk to the young people. You will be amazed at the comments that you see online. It's like, those kids, they're our kids, right? If you live in the city, these are your children too. And especially for the folks that are of my age, we have to remember that it wasn't that long ago they were saying the same exact thing about us. That's and right. We build these relationships. The relationship with the young people means so much, and we have to do that. And then also from my standpoint, from a political and a policy standpoint, we have to continue to push the narrative, to change the narrative, because we have to spend our taxpayer dollars in a smarter way. We have to invest more dollars in treating not just the whole child, but the whole family, and understanding that our communities are suffering from trauma, and we're not dealing with that. We have to understand that violence in our city is a disease, and you can't just treat one symptom of a disease. You have to treat the whole disease, and that means, yes, that does mean that police have to be a part of that conversation. conversation. But more importantly, that means that education has to be a part of the conversation, that mental health has to be a part of that conversation, that physical health has to be a part of that conversation. And we have to treat everybody in every community in that fact, because everyone that's living in the city of Baltimore is dealing with trauma. You can't live here and think that you're not dealing with trauma, right? Some of us more than most, those who live in the areas that are more impacted by the violence, those who have to interact with it each and every day, but we're all doing that, and we won't be a better city, and we can't expect our schools and our children to be better until we start to treat the disease that is spreading through our city.
Thank you.
Good evening. Good evening. My name is Issa, and I disagree with a lot of what is being said here tonight, and I'm standing to offer a critical voice. Brandon Scott came through the College Bound Foundation, correct? College Bound Scholar. There are students who get to school on time. There are actually students who get to school early. There's teachers, there's students, and there's principals already in the buildings. What is not in the building is more community organizations. I heard the police chief mention Safe Streets. There's a gentleman by the name of Imhotep Assis Fatiou who works for Safe Streets. He's a leader of an organization, an independent organization outside of the school system, and he also wrote a book called African Manhood in the 21st Century. In that book, it says, when the men don't stand up, the children run amok. Okay? I receive emails from North Avenue all the time, and I received the email recently saying that there was an initiative to have more black men into the schools. I worked in many Baltimore City schools, and the people who have the most influence are the hall monitors. Continuous growth. And in every school I worked in, there's side conversations in the hallways amongst the men, so desperate that they are planning to build their own school. Okay? And sometimes I just sit and I watch the conversations, and they have a long way to go before they actually get the school up and running. But this is conviction amongst a lot of the men in the school who hold most of the influence. So I'd like to revisit the question, and I'd like to direct the question directly to Dr. Santelice. How do you get more community organizations in the school? I attended the CEO talk in Park Heights in June when the school was out. And I came with my brothers, my whole organization, my fiance, my daughter, and I submitted a proposal to you. I followed up with an email the next day. I received the email today for a follow-up meeting on Thursday. Now, and this is not even going into who I am. In 2006, I received a grant from the Open Society Institute to establish the Poet Power Run Club at Paul Laurence Dunbar High School. Okay. I'm here representing the Black Running Organization. We're not a nonprofit, we're not a for-profit, we're an independent organization. For 3 years, we ran this program. All 40 students who went through the program are at college now. All of the students earned their service learning hours. All of the students arrived 7 o'clock in the morning to school, ran 3 miles before the school got started. The funding expired for the grant, and now I look on Instagram and I see some of the students who are still there, the underclassmen. Whenever there's a fight, they use emojis to say, damn, another fight that broke out. A student videoed all of the students coming into the building going through metal detectors. How do we get more black men into the school? Okay, because I heard the mama say, we need people in there who can relate to the kids. How do you get more black men into the school? How can community organizations who are not for-profit or nonprofit get into the school? How do you recruit people who have direct connections, not people who have to go through these qualifications, but people who have the shared experience and the influence over the students? And I would direct that question directly to you, ma'am. How can you get community organizations into the school?
So I think one of the things that we have really made an attempt to do, and again, I can follow up with you directly on, why it took so long for somebody to get back to you. So that's, we can do that, and I'll just name that. But I think part of what we're navigating is some of the real kind of, I'll just put it this way, regulations and standards that we are charged with in terms of who fills particular positions, right? And that's just kind of how it is in a public institution. I think where we have the work to do is around what are the kind of non-traditional positions and partnerships that allow us to fulfill our responsibility, right, to make sure that we go through all the checks and balances that are real, right, not the kind of perceived ones, but, you know, let's be clear, we've also had issues where we've had hall monitors, as wonderful as they are, who have slammed kids against walls. So, like, let's just, like, if we're going to keep it even, let's keep it even, right? We've got to figure out ways to connect in, I'd say, new kinds of roles, which is part of why these wellness coordinators, part of why we designed that position the way that we did, was so that we could give the opportunity for people who might not fit a traditional job description to have a role within a school where that kind of expertise you're talking about would be able to be brought to bear. And so part of what we have to do, and this gets into why a lot of, you know, the men you were referencing are thinking about starting their own school, because they can rethink and do it within their own school. What we need assistance in is rethinking within some of the confinements and structures that we have, how we bring in, again, non-traditional roles, right, that don't have the traditional titles that require X, Y, and Z, but like I said, like the wellness room coordinator, that's not a pre-existing one. You don't have to have 50 certifications to serve, but it's a different role. The other piece is in the organization of who the partners are, right? And so to your point, you know, you put a proposal together. I'll follow up on kind of why that one trailed off, but oftentimes what happens is we are building back the district's capacity to actually partner with folks, right? Because one of the positions, well, really a team of people, when I was here previously, my first round, we had an office that just did partnerships. Well, those 3 positions got cut in budget challenges. Now, I'm not saying that that's any excuse not to do anything. I'm just saying, right, to quickly respond and to actually get something moving, it does unfortunately sometimes take longer. And sometimes it takes longer because folks just weren't doing their work. Sometimes it takes longer because you need a point person who I can say definitively, this is the person who helps organize. Part of why that call from Bishop Miles stuck in my head was, one, I was getting ready to, you know, I was shifting and moving and it was Friday. But the other thing that he said to me was, you don't need to do anything. We got somebody who's going to coordinate this for you. All we need you to do is kind of weigh in at particular times, but we don't need you to do anything. And it's not that I want us absolved, but every time I've got to go to somebody who already is doing 50 things to do another thing, it makes it harder. And we have to get more creative. And I'm just putting that out there. So it's a combination of things, but you are right. We're trying to do that. There's, you know, your proposal, but, you know, I sat down with the folks from Project Numa, right, who understand, who are getting good traction with a lot of our young men, right? We have organizations that are getting traction with our young women. Our Teacher of the Year, Ms. Hall, the other night at a forum we had, she sang the same song of, we've got to have the relationship building. And the work she's doing with young women is because she has a relationship. And one of the things she recommended was, we need a team like that for girls in every single school in this district. The question is, and this is why I'm saying this, I need people who can help me think through how to do that when I don't yet have that existing team, and I've got to work with some of these other legal, right, restrictions. That's why we're creating new positions, and we're trying to rethink that.
Yep. Last year, I was hired to work with the acting force in the Parent Academy of Quality Education of the College Readiness Office.
Yes.
There were about 10, 13 of us at the table. We were all paid $30 an hour to give the same information that the College Foundation gives in the school that they're in. All of that money could have went to a program and could satisfy what's happening immediately. This was last year. And during the training, it was an organization that came from LA who can you train us? All of this costs money, all of this costs time, and we have people and resources right here in Baltimore who can help with the issue.
Fair enough.
Thank you so much, Issa, for your comment. The next question we have is from Facebook, and I am going to ask Chief Ham to address this question. What procedures are in place to protect teachers from violent parents?
All right, so, and unfortunately, we do have those situations, like the CEO mentioned earlier, where not only parents, but just adults may come into the school and be unruly or be very violent. But just to give you some background on us in terms of school police, there are about 180 schools and office buildings. We have 100 people on my team. And so we don't have the capacity to be in every building, but at the same time, we do have certain systems and mechanisms in place, like the visitor management system that we have in most schools, that where parents are required or visitors are required to check in, show their ID, and it goes through the system to check to see whether or not they may be a registered sex offender. They're required to check into the office. And so we do have systems and procedures and policies of the way that we're supposed to conduct ourselves inside of the schools. Unfortunately, most of the time when we're dealing with these issues, the adults are not following those policies. And so for those schools where we do have those issues occur, we do ask, someone from the school to call my office so that we can provide the appropriate support. We do get irate parent calls on a regular basis, and we're able to diffuse most of those situations. Sometimes we have to arrest parents, or adults, because we can't diffuse the situation. But the last thing we want to do is to arrest anyone. Our goal is to restore order in the school and make sure teaching and learning is taking place and that we're not affecting the education process for our young people. But we are here to provide support for all schools if there's an issue, whether it's a parent or whether it's an adult.
Thank you. Before we come back to the audience, just because fairness is something that's important to me and standing in my integrity is important to me, we committed to bouncing back and forth between questions, and I think we're one up in the room. So I'm going to ask another Facebook question. And the question is going to get directed to Derek. So we heard John mention earlier that one of the things that he thought was really important in schools for youth is that teachers receive de-escalation training. One of the questions on Facebook is, why aren't students receiving de-escalation training? So I'm interested in your thoughts around what de-escalation training should look like in schools in general. Should it just be offered to adults, administrators? Should it be offered to students, both, and why?
I feel like as much time as they put into these assemblies and award ceremonies and after school programs that most people don't go to, they should forward that time into teaching us how to handle ourselves. Because some people don't come from the best homes. They're not taught the best tactics on how to de-escalate situations or conflict resolution. So I feel like all that extra time that they take out of our classes that we can be learning in, that they can put that into some stuff. Because I know people that don't even go to some of the assemblies. They just go straight home because they know they're not even going to get anything. But I feel like they would still come to some of these assemblies if they knew I'm going to learn something about myself. I'm going to learn how to conduct myself. Maybe I'm not going to get in so much trouble. Maybe I'm not going to get locked up the next time I fight, just so I can avoid that. So I feel that all that time that they put into that's being wasted, they can put into some of these de-escalation, like teaching us how to conduct ourselves so we don't get into some of these situations that we've seen happen.
Thank you. I think we have a follow-up comment.
Yeah, I want to tell a quick story. I was having a conversation with my daughter about their culture as teenagers and how they are quick to fight. Like when we were growing up, it wasn't necessarily like somebody might say something to you, you say something back to them, they say something back to you, and then it escalates. But it's now, if you look at me the wrong way, I might pop you. And so I'm talking to her about why it's like that. Like what happened that is the culture that you guys are operating in. And what she explained to me was, well, I can't afford to be vulnerable. I can't afford for somebody to look at me like I'm a punk. If I don't handle my business, then I have to worry about not only this person bullying me, but that person over there who wasn't thinking about me before, now they think that I'm a punk, and so now they going to do stuff to me, say stuff to me. And it was shocking to me to hear that is the culture that our teenagers are operating in. That I have to fight. If I don't put my hands on you, then you, your friends, and all of the other people, and not that it's okay, just understanding that this is what they think. If you say something slick out your mouth to me, I have to pop you, because if I don't, the next week you want to say something. The week after that, 2 of your friends going to say something. The week after that, 3 of your friends might say something. And now I'm walking around in this school, and we already know, like, humiliation on social media is a thing for our children. So you say something to me, if I don't defend myself, it escalates to the point where we get into a fight, and the camera phones are going to come out, and the videos are going to go viral. And I'm explaining to her, I talked to my daughter about de-escalating and about walking away, but this idea that they have in their minds that if I walk away, I become more vulnerable than I did before the incident happened. And I don't know that a lot of people understand that that's the culture that our children are operating in.
And so just rounding those 2 points together, thank you both for your comments, Derek and Latrice. Sounds like a concern for our children is being disrespected and being viewed as weak, and at the same time not necessarily having the skills necessary to have those constructive conversations around what feeling disrespected and feeling weak look like, looking for training not only to be implemented for teachers around de-escalation, but equipping our youth with de-escalation, whether it's individual de-escalation or peer de-escalation skills, so that we can work toward shifting us away from the violence that we're seeing in schools now. Did I get that right? Okay. We'll open it back up to the floor.
Good evening. My name is Kim Trueheart, born and raised in this place called Baltimore. And I am a firm believer in the concept of community schools. Around the additional concept that I and every other black person in the city is a historically oppressed learner from generations, from the first slave ship where the slave master didn't want us to learn. And there are vestiges of that oppression to this day, where funds have not been allocated appropriately to educate our children. Some of us grew up in times where we were more fortunate than others. But today, there are deficits, significant deficits around funding. And I believe that through the concept of community schools, we can help address some of that. There's a continuous question about how do community people get involved through the community schools concept. And I sort of struggle with the concept that folks want to come here to the district and establish partnerships. The partnerships need to be at the school level. They need to be with the principal. And if the principal is not willing to engage with the community, get rid of them, okay? That principal has to go. We need authentic partnerships. You know, I was speaking in D.C. last month, and I got up proudly, said, I'm from Baltimore, and we are a traumatized city in this forum. I said, everybody in Baltimore is traumatized, and we need to address trauma. So what have I done in my community school? I brought in the University of Maryland School of Psychiatry, right, and team to help us address trauma, right? Schools have to be open to those partnerships. It's not costing that principal anything for this partnership that the community brought in, right? We have young men mentoring programs. They met yesterday with some of our kids, right? That's not costing the principal anything. I want the money that that principal does get to go into education. These wraparound services are desperately needed, but I need to hear from you, Dr. Santelises, that you're pushing this, that you're telling principals, partner with young brothers who come to you, right? Let's eliminate whatever the barriers are. Let's identify them as barriers that don't allow our ex-offenders to come in, who have a wealth of knowledge and experience. Let's figure out how, well, maybe their offense was a minor offense, right? It wasn't a felony, right? Can we still allow them in the building? We have denied some fathers the opportunity to come into the school building because they have records. You know, we've got to be creative, as you said, right? And this is a conversation for all of us. So I need to hear from you that you understand these barriers exist. You're asking principals to be more inclusive. And there are some I know are afraid to let black men in their building. Okay? And so we got to deal with that too. But the value of having black men in our schools is untold, right? It is so invaluable. We need them. Look at who's in this room. It's not an overwhelming number of black men, right? But we need them. So we got to open the doors. Can I ask you to address that?
Sure, it would be easier for me to just say amen, but I'll say something else. No, and, you know, look, part of what we are doing is about culture change, right? And I do think that, and you know this as well as I do, but I will say that there are some school leaders, like teachers, like central office staff, like whatever else, who need to develop the skills to be able to bring community in ways that are supportive. Some of it is fear, but some of it is when you are in a school that is challenged and set up in the ways that I talked about earlier, sometimes your day-to-day experience of the challenges has kept you so focused on getting through the day-to-day that your skill set in relationship building with community is not as strong as it needs to be, right? And that's just plain. The other piece that we can do, and which is why I've said before and I will say again, when folks feel like they are hitting a wall with a particular school, you've got to let me know. And by me, I don't necessarily mean just me. I mean, call the Family and Community Engagement Office, right? In some cases, now I will also say this, there are some school leaders who've said, like, I can't manage 15 different people right now coming into my school. So I need to start with 2 or 3 and get my school together. Because if your school's and see, I got school people nodding at me. If your school is out of control, just adding people to help without any strategy, without any knowledge of how to do that is just going to continue the spin. So I would just say, see, don't you wish I had just now said amen? That yes, I don't have any disagreement, but part of what we've been talking with Family and Community Engagement about and the school's office under the chief of schools is how do we help build principals' capacity? Because there are some principals. I was over at a school this morning with a principal in her second year, and She is where I went for code schools. And she said to me, I love every time you bring people in the building because it just means I have more partners. She has partners coming out of the wazoo. You've got kids, like I said, who were writing code for drones and bots. And she said, I got that because I let folks in my building. But she just has that skill. She has a way with people. She's organized. She knows how to deploy folks. And not all of our leaders have that. So we're going to have to develop them and give them the support to be able to do that.
Thank you. Councilman Scott, the next question is for you. We need programs inside and outside of the school to bring children together. We used to have rec centers that did that. What happened to them? They were beneficial back in my day.
So I think that the answer to this is real simple. So starting with Mayor William Donald Schaefer through the end of Mayor Rawlings Blake's term, rec centers were cut out of the budget. You know, the truth is that for now, since Ms. Trueheart will probably know the number better than me, since 2012, the number of rec centers through reopening and building new ones has been going in the opposite direction. But when you think about when William Donald Schaefer was mayor and the same thing happened, I know for some people they have like this, you know, holy grail thing with Mayor Schaefer, but we have to root ourselves in reality and understand that more people left the city under him than anyone else, and all the resources and things left with those people. But also Mayor Smoke, the same thing. We love Mayor Smoke for being the first elected black mayor of the city, but lots of rec centers were closed in his time here. And Martin O'Malley and Mayor Dixon and Mayor Rawlings Blake, the same thing. For them, it was a money decision, right? They had a finite amount of money, and they decided to invest their money in a different way. Now, the Rec and Parks Department does have a capital program and a plan to build new rec centers. For example, just this last year, C.C. Jackson, my childhood rec center in Park Heights, was open. It's been renovated and expanded. We have the Rita Church Center in East Baltimore that has been open, built, and expanded out. You have South Baltimore. I think right now they're working on a Cherry Hill Rec Center, but that's still not enough, right? So it goes back to my earlier question, and we had previously at the end of the last term this discussion of whether we should lease or sell garages to benefit this rec center capital plan. Mayor Pugh wants to spend it to go into this neighborhood investment fund, but I think it's evident and clear that we have to spend more money to do better for rec centers. But I think the real thing that folks are going to have to grapple with, and Ms. Kim hinted at, and we talk about this a lot, is that even the way that rec centers were built in the city of Baltimore were built to keep black people from never going to the next neighborhood, right? So there are buildings, rec centers open today, right, that are literally like the size of this room. I'm here to tell you, that's not a rec center, you guys. If it doesn't have at least one full-size gym, it's not a rec center. If it doesn't have an indoor pool or a place for children to work out or a dance room, that's not a rec center. So what we have to understand is that it's also not just about the quantity, it's about the quality of the places. How many children can we actually get into those centers? How can we make it a place that we can actually have it open for the young people in the community, but also for adults like us who spend money, myself included, to go to Planet Fitness or whatever gym, to pay to go to a city-run facility, so it's benefiting our young people. And we have to do that, and that work is gonna be important over the next few years. So myself, my council colleagues, the mayor, the council president, to figure out how we can fast track this plan that Rec and Parks has, because the plan is there. You can actually go and meet and they'll show you the rec center plans, which ones are going to be up in which capital program year, how many dollars they're going to spend on it. But we need to make that happen quicker and faster across the city, so there are regionalized large rec centers for every child, and they all don't have to have the same thing. Why is it that, we have this rec center that has, we do the basketball program, and then a 6-minute walk away to do the same exact thing? The young people want diversity. Not all young people love basketball. We all know I love basketball, right? But some of them might want to go to the rec center to code or make music or make skateboards or do all these other things. We also have to diversify what is happening in there, and the best way to do that is actually ask the young people what they want to see in the rec centers.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Hope Mims, and I am a class of '89 alumni of Frederick Douglass Senior High School. And our kids, they don't have any hope. They lack that. For every adult that's in this room, you knew what school was when we went to school. We loved going to school. We went to school every day because we had a good time at school. For kids today, it's different. They lack hope. I'm going to stay in the vein of Frederick Douglass High School, but there are other communities that of Frederick Douglass High School, the feeder schools that lead up to those, all experience the same things. So I spent some time at Frederick Douglass right after the situation that happened. I had a group of about 50 folks that showed up to meet with the principal. And it was, before I had the meeting, I did some homework because I do homework. So I found that at Douglass, 1% of the student population is proficient in mathematics, and 2% is proficient in reading. Those aren't good stats. The programs that are at that school would suggest that those students are going to college. They have a law program. 1% proficient in math, 2% proficient in reading, but their flagship program is the law program. You can't become a lawyer without going to college. And with those statistics, you probably aren't going to college. So the students lack hope. Where we see the most benefit for students is when they can learn something and they can do it with their hands. That's what those communities like Douglass, that's what they need. They need to see a sense of hope where I can learn a skill and I can do it with my hands, and I can leave this school and I can go and get an internship which is going to turn into a job so that my family isn't suffering. I don't have to be out on the corner. My mom don't have to be out there tricking. Let's just be honest. I don't have to live like that. As a result of the meeting that we had, Harkins Construction, which is a very well-known construction company, they have reached out to me, and I've reached out to the principal at Douglass. They want to come and do a session or a seminar on construction careers for those students. They don't have to go to college for that. But it's offering a sense of hope for these kids. What can we do to bring some of these programs that have been cut out of these schools, especially in those communities, back? Because those communities is where we see a lot of the issues that constantly happen. Because these communities and these kids, they don't see hope, and they need to see a light at the end of the tunnel.
Thank you, Hope. Yes.
So a couple of things. One, part of the work that we are doing around career education, we just had a big audit, meaning we looked at all of our career programs throughout the district to look at how and where are we placing particular programs, where do we need to make those connections, and we're doing that. But I also want to say this, not because you necessarily meant this, but I want to be clear for everyone. The days when we could say, it's okay, you can just work with your hands and not be proficient readers and mathematicians is gone. It is gone. So I just want to make sure we're all on the same page, right? That this is not you can't read, you can't do math, so we're going to get you something, baby, to do with your hands. The kind of career connections we're making and we're looking into, particularly for places like Douglass, and I only say like Douglass because like Douglass, they need a defining set of opportunities and experiences that engage them, that actually lead to family sustaining wages, right? And so part of what we're looking at is how are we giving young people earlier access, right, to some of the careers, for example, because we know in the region that medical technology aerospace, right? All of those are industries that are booming in the state of Maryland and, frankly, in the city of Baltimore and in this region. And we thought we were going to make a big announcement, but they're putting it back. I'll say it a little bit. We just became one of what will be announced in a couple of weeks as a regional, one of like 4 school districts in the region to really look at how are we seating in our middle grades some of those workplace exposures, right? So that young people, as a former middle school teacher, you don't just lose hope when you are in 11th grade and your PARCC score is low, right? You became disengaged years before that. And so when we look, part of why we're looking at our middle schools is to say, how do we get young people hooked early so they have a reason to learn math? Not everybody has to do advanced placement, calculus, and, go off to do, but you do still need some algebra. And I sat with because I had such a great, by the way, the school was Fort Worthington this morning, but I had such a great time in Fort Worthington, and I sat with a young girl, Taylor, in the 6th grade. And she was writing code for her bot. She was doing that as a 6th grader. Because of the experience that she has had and her classmates around her with code, right? She is saying, as she's, by the way, tutoring me in how she's writing this code, and I asked her, okay, why is it that you're programming in that line of code this angle at 90 degrees? And she says to me, and she turns almost like, wow, this poor lady doesn't know anything. She said, well, you have to have a lot of geometry when you program bots and when you program drones. Because if I don't have the angle right, now here she is schooling me, right? If I don't have the angle right, this thing's gonna crash. She said, so I've had to learn what the angles are. Now this is a 6th grader, and part of why I'm taking this painstakingly you through this is because what we have seen is that when the real engagement begins in how do I connect what I enjoy, what I'm turned on by, with the content knowledge you want me to have. And she already knows now, because you got to be good in math to do this. And she already knows, right, that she's got a whole lot of other things to learn, but she's doing that in 6th grade. And so part of what we're looking for is how do we give more experiences? And we are doing that, but I just want us all to be clear. The days of give that baby a hammer because they don't read very well, those are over. Not everybody has to love Chaucer or write paragraphs on James Baldwin. But I'm telling you, even when we meet with construction firms, when we meet with technology firms, they're telling us the same thing. Your kids have to be able to reach a standard of mathematics, maybe not that a physicist meets, but that level, we still have to do that. So the engagement question for me is part of what addresses some of what we've been talking about tonight. Fort Worthington, you know why Fort Worthington doesn't have discipline issues right now? It doesn't have it because those kids are engaged in programming bots. And when you're programming bots, you don't have as much time to focus on all the baggage you came in with. When you have an art class, you get to paint out some of what you had to pass on the way to school. And so it is both, but that's why I say we do need the trauma-centered schools, but I don't want the trauma defining who our kids are. You get healed from the trauma to then be who you are designed to be. So I'm fine with, and we're doing the career piece, but I just want everybody to be clear. For me, as for me in this house, it does not mean it is now okay for kids not to reach a level of proficiency, because that's just not fair.
So just a follow-on question for clarity for Dr. Santelises, because this question popped up as you were speaking. Are you saying that vocational and trade schools are done?
No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying we're actually revitalizing the career and trade pathways so that you can find them in multiple schools. Mervo, and sitting on a panel with all these Mervo
Yay!
grads, right?
Watch out there.
But I think the Mervo grads would also say that their exposure to career is part of what kept them engaged in school. And you're seeing people who clearly went on to do a variety of things that they still needed to be able to think, read, write, spell. Am I correct, Councilman?
I was a coder, computer programming person at Mervo.
See, okay.
And I don't code, but.
Exactly. And what we're saying is that when our young people go out, I mean, and I tell the story and the staff is tired of me hearing the story. I was out on Easter buying my girls' tights, and across the department store, a father runs up to me, Dr. Santelises, is that you? And with tights in my hands, because that's what I was buying, I said, yes, I think so. Long story short, that father says to me that his child, his daughter, did what we asked her to do. She graduated. And she graduated thinking she'd be able to open her own daycare center because she loves working with little kids, and she went through that pathway. What she found out only 2 years after graduation is that if you're going to run your own daycare center, there's a whole lot more you need than just having graduated from high school with your little daycare certificate. And I had to stand there in the middle of the department store and apologize to that father that his baby did what we had asked her to do, but she still did not know what it was going to take to open her own daycare center and be successful at that and contribute to her community and be able to sustain her own family someday. That is what I'm talking about. So yes, we are building the pathways. We're not dismantling trade schools, but I think we need to come out of 1950 and realize that if you're going to fix a car today and make serious money, you better know how to work a computer and you better know some math. And stop kidding ourselves that there are these jobs out there that just because they don't require college mean that you still don't need academic skills. That's what I'm saying.
Before we go on to the next question, can I just jump in there really quickly too? I'm sitting on the panel right now as a teacher at Mervo, but I'm 1 year removed, 6 years at Douglas High School. And so I think it is somewhat unfair to say that the children at Douglas High School are without hope, because I taught those kids. Those kids very much have hope. I think it is also discounting the students at Douglas to say, well, there's a law leadership program. You're also discounting the EMT program, where we have students leaving high school going directly into the EMT field, right, the Fire and Academy, and they're making jobs starting at $35,000, $40,000. I think we're discounting the media arts, the RAMP production ran by Dr. Patterson, who is doing a phenomenal job in getting those children certified when they walk out of those schools. I think we're discounting the graduates who are in college now, who are doing wonderful things, who have received full rides to schools like Goucher and Loyola, and who want to go on and pursue an education field and become teachers and give back to Baltimore City. Those children in Douglas absolutely have hope. And if there are anybody out there that's listening who is currently an educator, because I see my girl Terry Ray in the background, who is a community school coordinator at Douglas, please do not discount that school. Please do not say that those children walk into that building without hope, because they actually, what they imagine, what they dream for themselves, what they want to be is not defined by that one incident. And so I want to be fair in saying, like, let's make sure that we give our due diligence to what Douglas has going on, because don't let the stories of what's happened over the last couple of years be what defines that school. Because I was in the trenches, and that school has a special place in my heart. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Thank you. So at this point, we're going to take our last question for the evening, and what better way to close the evening than to take a question from one of our youth.
Hi, I'm Olivia. I go to City, and I am a youth ambassador for Ceasefire. And I just wanted to say that as a youth myself, I know that we just want to be listened to, and we want to be heard, and because we have opinions about our own education, and we care about it, and we want to be shown that, like, you know, the people that are in control of it care about it too. And sometimes it's kind of hard to believe that when, for example, the whole first week of school we got out half days because it was too hot in our schools to even learn. And it's not, that shows some of us that some people don't care about our learning, so it gets them in this mentality like, why should we care if they don't care about our education? And another example is you guys talked a lot about like mental health and dealing with PTSD from the communities that we grow up in, but like how do you expect us to talk through that when there's only like less than 10 counselors in a whole school, and we have one counselor for our entire grade, and there's like more than 100 kids in that grade? And how is one person supposed to deal with all of those kids' stories and them coming in every day and their daily problems? Yeah, so that was.
Thank you. Would anyone on the panel like to address that? Derek.
I'd like to piggyback off that because she spoke about something that is really true. Because in Dunbar, I don't even know my counselor. It's somebody I know that just lost a very close family member in my school, and I can 99% bet you that he don't know that counselor. He don't like our administrator for our grade, so who you gonna talk about that to other than us? So that's what I feel we need to work on, because if you don't know your counselor and you don't even know that there is a counselor, how you gonna work out your problems in school? But you still gotta come to school.
Thank you, Derek. So before we close out, just a couple of quick things to share, and then I'll turn it over to Dr. Santelises to close out the meeting for this evening. First of all, thank you all so much for coming and for participating actively, those of you that are physically here and those of you that are with us digitally and virtually. For those of you that are in the room, we are hopeful that you picked up a blue evaluation form. If you didn't, please pick up one on the way out. We're interested in your feedback on how this conversation went, what went well, what ideas you have for what could make it better. Also back there on the table, for those folks that are interested in how to become more involved as parents. You heard Ms. McIver mention that she is a member of the Parent and Community Advisory Board for Baltimore City Public Schools, as am I. We are always looking for parents to come to our meetings, to participate in our board sessions, to learn about policies that are going to be impacting your children, your schools, your communities, and raising your voices with us in partnership. Also back there on the table, Dr. Santelises mentioned the Family and Community Engagement Office. This is a resource that is available to you, is fully staffed. The interim director, Sabrina Sutton, is standing back there by the table now. And there's also a youth engagement coordinator, one who has been newly hired, Rashad Stanton, who you can reach out to. He's standing up here, and or who you can have your students or youth reach out to. Finally, on the back of the table, a few of you mentioned, how do we start to teach our youth about conflict resolution and transformation? How do we make sure those conversations happen not only with parents and administrators, but also, not only with students and administrators, but also with parents? There's information back there that provides free services to all Baltimore City public schools, the students that attend those schools, the teachers and administrators that work at those schools, and the parents of those students to take advantage of conflict transformation services so that de-escalation can be learned. And I'm being handed one final note. Thank you, Tanae. For those of you who had questions that we were unable to answer, remember that if your question is on the Facebook feed, it will be getting answered within 48 hours. For those of you that are in the room, there are these white index cards on the table by the exit door. Please jot your questions down. We will write those questions on the Facebook feed, and we will share those answers there as well. So with that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Santelises to close us out.
Great, and I really just want to close out with thank yous. First, to our panel. You all were wonderful. It was great to have folks who have so much wisdom and depth of knowledge in your area, and everyone should know, came really on, like, turning on a quarter. They rearranged schedules. They came out. I don't know what exam or something you might have tomorrow. But I just want to thank the panel, really, because I think it definitely enriched the conversation. in really, really important ways. I want to thank everyone who attended this evening. I know, a lot of folks had to peel off earlier, and that is fine. But the fact that you did come out, you did care, you wanted to be part of the conversation. Thank you for the push in the questions. They were the right questions, the right time. And all of our folks who were on Facebook Live, and I don't know how many of you there were. How many? 200 plus. So for 200 plus folks who could have been tuning in to their favorite television show or anything else tonight, the fact that you weighed in really says a lot about the potential and the support from the Baltimore community. I said something to someone in the press a couple days ago, and they want to fixate on the one incident. But one of the things I said is, yes, as challenging as last week was, I definitely had more calls about how do we help, how do we move forward, what can we do collectively, and I think that is a sign of really who we are as Baltimoreans. And that was in no way personified any better than it was through our young people. So I want to make sure that I give a special thank you really tonight to both John, who I think is still here, and to Derek, who came out tonight, and all of the young people who spoke. Thank you all really for caring about it. And I want to give a last thank you. What?
I'm sorry. Can you talk about immediate next steps?
Oh, that's right.
Thank you.
You've trained me well. See, and she knew I was just getting ready to thank Shantae. So she cut in. So in terms of immediate next steps, one, I think we have some real concrete suggestions that came out of this evening. I know I was taking notes. Staff were taking notes. And I think that there's a lot here that is just in line directionally. It's just about prioritizing and maybe rearranging some of our focus on some of those things. And so we will, as follow-up to the letter that I sent out to staff on Friday, we'll be following up and basically communicating out through our website. So look for it not buried in the depths of the website, but like on kind of the front page of the website, what some of those next steps are, so that you all can see kind of where we're beginning, and so then you can ask us how it's going along the way. So those are some immediate next steps. Does that sound good? And then I would just end by saying, can we please all give Shantae Guy just an amazing round of applause? She just, as usual, did a fantastic job. And everybody, please have a great night, get home safely, and thanks again for coming out.